you've been talking about Tim Walz and obviously his connections to not just China, which is one thing, but his particularly warm connection with the Communist Party of China. Talk to us about what else you've been learning as you dig into his past and his record. How does he surprise or not surprise you as you dig in and compare him to other politicians that are more on the compromise scale?
It's a great question, Chanel. There's a couple of differences, and some of those differences I actually think make Walz a little bit more frightening. The first thing is that, we've talked about the Bidens. You've covered the Bidens, the money they receive from the Chinese and from other overseas entities. With the Bidens, it was very transactional. You pay and you get to play. And China seems to fit that mold. And I believe that gave Beijing leverage over the first family of the United States. Tim Walz does not seem to have received any money that we know of from the Chinese. But in a respect, you could argue his circumstance is worse because he is what they used to call during the Cold War a fellow traveler. A fellow traveler is somebody who's maybe not a member of the Communist Party, is not even necessarily a communist themselves, but they travel along. They think that communists are good guys and they have good goals and we need to be good friends. And that's kind of what you see with Tim Walz. He ideologically, when the students were going to these exchange programs in the 1990s, gave them ridiculous analysis of Chinese communism, saying that, in the Chinese system, they share. That's why there's no poverty, unlike the American system where we don't share. Of course, there's lots of poverty in China. And of course, the sharing, I'll put that in quotation marks, is not voluntary. It's compulsory, which means it's not really sharing at all. So you have that kind of naivete. You have that defense of China on human rights. Whenever he brings up the human rights situation in China, he immediately pivots to the fact that we have had human rights situations in the United States in the past, even though there's absolutely no comparison between the two. He actually does. So that's the first thing that I think is disconcerting. The second thing is that he's really tried to lie about this. He claimed that this exchange program, where there was some 30 trips, that it was a Harvard-funded program. It was not a Harvard-funded program. It was a program that involved 2 Harvard graduates, but we now know that it was actually funded by the Chinese government. And my question would be, you knew that, why did you lie about it? And you wonder what else he's lying about. So there's that real concern about, we don't know what we don't know. And he would certainly be the point person on China policy if Kamala Harris became president, simply because he had been there 30 times and he's had lots of relationships with Chinese front groups and others. That in and of itself would make it very, very disconcerting for him to be in that role.